My name is Troy Snerin. I'm the Director of Congressional Affairs and Trade at the Korea Economic Institute. And we're very delighted today to have Ignacio Garcia Bercero, the Director for the European Commission's Sustainable Development and Bilateral Trade Relations, here with us. As you all know, earlier this year, the EU and Korea signed what is now the largest bilateral trade agreement. And in the process, this agreement became public a couple months ago, and there's been a lot of questions within the United States about what's the details in terms of really certain issues such as autos, and also what's the process in terms of ratification of the agreement. As you may know, the Lisbon Treaty came into effect yesterday, so this is now something that's become relevant in terms of the EU-Korea FTA. And just a little bit about Ignacio. You all have his bio in front of you. But as I said, he's the Director of the European Commission's Sustainable Development and Bilateral Trade Relations Division at the Director, for the EU's Trade Commission. And he's also served prior to this as the head of the European Commission's unit dealing with WTO dispute settlement and trade barriers regulation. And he's been with the EU Commission since 1987 and has had a very distinguished career there. He also has a law degree from, and excuse me if I mispronounce this, but Universidad Complutense. Sorry, my Spanish is not that good. And a Master's of Law with distinction from the University College London. And as you all, I'm sure, are well aware, he serves as the lead negotiator for the EU on the EU-Korea FTA. And with that, I will hand it over.
Thank you very much, and let me say it's a big pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you about the free trade agreement between the European Union and Korea. This is an extremely important agreement. I think it is not an exaggeration to say that it's the most ambitious free trade agreement that has ever been negotiated by the European Union. What I would like is to give you a basic sense about what are the main elements of the agreement, and at the same time to have the opportunity to answer the questions that you would undoubtedly have. Let me start a little bit by the context. Our decision to start negotiations with Korea was the result of a policy debate in the European Union about the need to develop a more active policy on free trade negotiations. We have been, of course, very strongly committed to the multilateral process, and that continues to be our top trade policy priority. We came to a conclusion at some point in time that it was simply not feasible for us not to follow at the same time the free trade policy, mainly aimed at important export markets for the European Union, mainly aimed at emerging economies which still have a significant level of protection which was hampering our exports. And it was in the basis of those criteria which were developed in a document that was called the Global Group, and which was discussed with the member states in late 2006, that we obtained a mandate to negotiate free trade agreements with 3 countries or group of countries: South Korea, India, and countries in Asia. By the way, I would think that this is also the first time that the European Union has been engaged on free trade negotiations in Asia. All the free trade agreements that we have so far negotiated were here countries that were in the neighborhood of the European Union or certain countries in Latin America. So it was the first time that we have become engaged in negotiating the trade agreement with what after all is the most dynamic region of the world economy. The negotiations with Korea were launched in May 2007. I think it's about the same time that the negotiations of the FTA between the US and Korea were in the process of being concluded. And they have been developed within the last 2 years through a process which has often been intensive and sometimes has been controversial. I would say also cooperative. And I think that if there has not been a willingness by both sides to cooperate to bring this agreement forward, I'm sure that there would have been quite a few banana skins that would have prevented us from reaching the right destination. But basically, the negotiations were concluded earlier this year through a political meeting between Baroness Ashton and Mr. Kim. Following this understanding that was reached at the political level on the key outstanding questions, we have the intensive work by lawyers of both sides to have a legal text that has been subject to full legal verification. And once it was done in October of this year, the text of the free trade agreement was initialed by Baroness Ashton and Mr. Kim in Brussels. Now, initially, what it means is basically has no legal effect, but it means that this is a text which both parties now agree and identify is the final outcome of their negotiations. So we are currently engaged in doing is having the text translated into all European languages. This is a legal requirement. I think the Koreans on their side, they are having translated into Korean. I suppose they will do their job faster than ours, because I can tell you sometimes working with our translators is much more complicated than negotiating with Korea. But we would be very much aiming on that basis to have the text formally presented to the Council of Ministers early next year, so that then it can be signed. After it has been signed, it will go to the European Parliament, because as has been mentioned by some of you, under the Lisbon Treaty, it is very clear that all trade agreements require the assent of the European Parliament. So we will have a procedure in the European Parliament where the European Parliament would basically, at the end of the day, have to decide on a majority vote on their support for this agreement. And our expectation, and I think that we are quite confident on that, is that this agreement will then enter into force at some point in time in the second half of next year. Of course, it will not be impossible to be more precise than that, because all of these are complex procedures, and it's not possible just to know exactly how long a different part of the procedure will take. But very much our expectation is that the agreement will be fully applicable in the second half of next year. By the way, I will emphasize one point. Before the Commission initialed this agreement, the text of the agreement was available for the Member States for quite some time. There were very intensive discussions with all the Member States before we proceeded to initial, so we wouldn't have done that. We hadn't had the clear indication that there is a very strong political backing for this agreement in the European Union. Now, I would like to give you a certain sense about what we see as being the main elements of the agreement, and why we certainly think that it is a extremely important agreement for the European Union. First of all, the agreement is very ambitious in terms of duty elimination. Practically all tariffs are eliminated. The only exception is basically rice and a few other agricultural products which are not particularly significant in our bilateral trade with Korea, but everything else is subject to duty elimination. A lot of it already are entering into force. Industrial trade is basically duty-free over 5 years. There are few products for which Korea has a 7-year transitional period, with very small list of products. So basically, after 5 years, about 96–97% of our trade and tariff lines, it is duty-free. We have estimated that the duty savings that would accrue to European exporters as a result of this agreement come down to 1.6 billion euros on a yearly basis. This is, of course, based on existing trade, but our expectation would be that this agreement should result in a significant increase of exports from the European Union to Korea, since after all, with two exceptions,